Yeah, so as we've heard, well, as you all know, our theme for this series of Sangha Nights is building the Buddha land. And as we've heard, what this really means is creating a community, gathering together and deepening a community of practitioners, Buddhist practitioners, characterized by metta, by openness, by friendship, a community that shares a vision, a community that shares a higher vision that unites us. And this community is an environment. It's an environment. A Buddha land, a Buddha field is the environment created by a Buddha or Bodhisattva. And we're trying to create an environment in which we can flourish, in which we can grow spiritually. A mini Buddha land, a mini Buddha field within the society around us, which is often not that conducive. And we've heard that there's a symbol for this community, this activity of building a community and this community. And that symbol is a traditional one of the 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara. So Avalokiteshvara, the 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara, a rather odd-looking figure. He's got 1,000 arms, each offering something different to the world, each offering something different to human beings. Each arm, in a way, is an individual, one of us. Somebody, a Sangha member, somebody who's offering something. So each arm is an individual, but these individuals are united by a higher vision and a higher aspiration. And in the image of the 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara, that's symbolized by the jewel, which he holds to his heart with his central two hands. And that jewel is described traditionally as the bodhicitta. Bodhi meaning awakening, and chitta meaning heart and mind. There's not a distinction drawn. So awakening heart, awakening mind, if you like, the enlightened mind. And tonight, what I'm going to do, tonight my talk is called Inviting the Enlightened Mind. And what I'm going to do is talk about a very traditional practice, which is designed to, as it were, open us up to the enlightened mind. Designed to help us to get our small mind out of the way and open up to a much bigger mind, a much more expansive mind. And this might seem a rather odd way of talking about what we're doing in our Buddhist practice, because probably a lot of what we do and a lot of the way we think about our practice is we're working on ourselves. We're sort of tinkering. We're like our own mechanics. We're sort of tuning our own engine. We're sort of creating a better being in ourselves by practicing the law of karma, meditation, ethics, etc. But it's also very traditional in many Buddhist schools, many Buddhist cultures, to see our practice as much more about getting ourselves out of the way and letting something larger come in. As I said, that might seem an odd way of practicing, might seem an odd vision, but actually there's a lot to it, because the enlightened mind we're not enlightened. It's going to come as though, it's going to seem as though it's almost coming from outside us, something we need to let go. Our ego, our little mind, needs to let go in order for it to enter. And we sort of get, I think we get a sort of foretaste of that, or at a lower level with meditation, actually. Because if you're on the borders of what are called the dhyanas, the sort of higher meditative states, it's not something we're doing. It feels like it's coming from outside. It feels like we have to let go of control to let it happen. If we want to stay controlled, it won't happen. And people often talk about this in early meditation practice, that, well, it felt like there was something, scary. I had to let go of control, and that was going to be scary. But unless our small mind, our ego, is willing to let go of control and let something bigger come in, we're always going to be limiting ourselves to the person we are right now. So when something, when a really higher state comes along, it's going to seem like it comes from outside. It's going to seem like we have to sort of let go and let it come in. And that's a very, very traditional way of seeing Buddhist practice. So what I'm going to talk about is a traditional practice which is designed to allow us to do that. And it's called the sevenfold puja, okay? The sevenfold puja. Many of you will be very familiar with this. Some of you will never have heard of it. Sevenfold because it's got 7 stages. Puja meaning ritual, ceremony, something like that. And what the sevenfold puja is a progressive series of reflections, images, almost meditations, a progressive series which is designed to gradually open us up, something higher can come in. So we get out of the way and something higher can come in. And the words of the sevenfold puja, so the way we do it normally, there's other ways of doing it, but the way we do it normally when we're in a group is in what we call and response, where somebody says a line and somebody says, and we all repeat it back, basically. There's other things go on like chanting and whatnot, but that's most of it is in that format. And the words that we use are taken from a text called the Bodhicharyavatara, the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, written by an 8th century Indian monk called Shantideva. So those are the words that we use, but actually this practice way, way predates Shantideva. It was around from quite early on. It appears in quite early sutras. So yes, the practice of the sevenfold puja. And this progressive series of reflections, images, gradually opening us up to something higher. And there's a metaphor involved in this. There's a metaphor involved, which is quite strong in the sevenfold puja, which is inviting an honored guest into our space, inviting an honored guest into our living space. So it might be interesting to think who that honored guest would be. We always used to be sort of Nelson Mandela. I don't know. It could be, who would your honored guest be? Just someone you've really got tons and tons of respect for. Not because they're really good at sort of hefting a cross into the box, but for who they are, and not because of what they wrote either, but for who they are. For some, we might, I don't know, it might be, they don't even have to be alive. So it could be the Buddha, the Dalai Lama, Sangha, somebody you really, wow, they're coming around for tea. This is important. This is a big thing. We're inviting a really honored guest. So what would the first thing we do? The first thing we do is tidy up our living space and beautify our living space. We would not invite them around to a flat or a house with washing up in the sink, dirty cups and socks on the floor. And we would get in flowers and, and we would really put some effort into tidying up our living space. But of course, the living space that we're inviting the enlightened mind into is our mind. So the first thing we need to do is to clean out, beautify, tidy up our mind. So the words we use in the very first section of the sevenfold puja, the one that we generally use in this context, there are other choices of words that get used, but the words we use are about the beauties of nature. They're calling to mind the beauties of nature. So we're filling our mind with beauty. We're cleaning up our mind. We're making it a suitable environment, an environment that the honored guest is going to want to come into. They're not going to turn up and think, well, I'm off, So yeah, we're beautifying our mind. That's the first stage. It's called worship, but in a way, that's what we're doing. We are beautifying our mind. making our space, our mental space, a suitable one. And what would the second thing we would do when our honoured guest arrives? We would offer them something. We would offer them a cup of tea. We might offer them a gift. So this is precisely what we do. We make offerings. So after the first section, we chant a mantra. And if you haven't done this before, you'll observe that people will come up to the shrine and make offerings. Offerings of incense, offerings of candles, etc. So we're acting out this offering. And I'm going to turn around so you won't see me. They're not there. There are traditionally always 7 offering bowls on the shrine, and we've left them off tonight. And these 7 offering bowls, which are always on the shrine, they represent the 7 traditional offerings made to an honoured guest. So that's, it's a really central metaphor. So much so that all shrines have got 7 offering bowls on them. I can't remember them all. There's food, drink, water for washing, water for drinking, light, perfume, etc., etc. But the 7 things that you would in India traditionally offer to an honoured guest. And as well as making these offerings, people come forward and they make their offerings to the shrine. We also act out. Well, we also we bow. We bow. So we're expressing our respect. If an honoured guest came into our living space, we would beautify the space, we would offer them something, and we would make it clear that we respect them. It wouldn't be like, well, make yourself a cup of tea, I've got some emails to write. We would make it clear that we really value them, we really respect them. And bowing is the way we do that. We are saying, I recognise that you are more worthy, higher than my little self. I bow. And you'll see people bow to the shrine. If you haven't done a puja before, you'll see that people make their offerings, but they bow to the shrine. A really strong, physically expressed expression of respect, admiration. It's really powerful. It's a really powerful thing to do. Acknowledging that something is higher than me, high enough that I bow to it. I remember I went to loads of pujas before I could ever bring myself to do this, before I could it was like, I know I'll just sit here and watch other people, thank you very much. And I don't think that's particularly uncommon, actually. I think there's often a terrific resistance to this act of bowing because it is so real, because it's physical, it's so real. We could pay lip service, all the lip service we want to, I want to go beyond my ego. But this is really going beyond my ego. This is really expressing, I am reducing my ego. I am saying that something is higher than me. And we can pay lip service to going beyond the ego all we like, but when it comes to it, bow. I remember reading a book by a Zen master called, I can't remember what it's called now. Anyway, he says bowing is the most important practice. The most important practice, because it is genuinely expressing a sort of reduction in our ego. So our ego doesn't want to think, our normal self doesn't want to think that there's anything higher than it that we need to acknowledge. But if there's nothing higher than us as we are now, we're in deep trouble. At least I am. I suspect that you are. There's nothing we can grow towards. There's nothing we can grow towards. So a life without something higher that we're in relationship to would be quite an impoverished life, actually. And this is brought out, there's a sutta in the Pali Canon where the Buddha, after his enlightenment, shortly after his enlightenment, he says to himself, or he thinks. And excuse the sexist language, the Buddha wasn't very aware of the need for non-sexist language. He said, a man is unhappy who has nothing to look up to. Of course, he was meaning, I don't know what the translation is, mankind, a member of mankind, a human being is unhappy if they have nothing to look up to. It's called the Gaurava Sutta, Sutta on respect or reverence. And he makes it clear that he is going to live in looking up to a higher principle, which is going to serve. So even a Buddha looks up. Even a Buddha looks up. This respect, this paying respect, is brought out much more in the second stage of the puja. So the second stage of the puja, we've already expressed our respect by bowing to the shrine, or those of us who wish to. And the second stage is called salutations. But salutations is a slightly odd translation of a respectful greeting. And this is an Eastern respectful greeting, so it's not a hi, it's a bow. At the very least, it's a bow. So some of the words in there, it says, as many atoms as there are in the 1,000 million worlds, so many times I make reverent salutations, so many times I bow to all the Buddhas of the three eras, to the Dharma, to the Sangha, and to all the teachers, and to everyone worthy of respect, basically. So all practitioners. We're bowing to everything and everybody that expresses this bodhicitta in however small a form, basically. We're expressing our respect in this very strong way. And there's a traditional way of doing this. It says as many atoms as there are. One of the ways to do this is to imagine that every atom in the universe is bowing along with us, that the whole universe exists in respect for this spiritual principle, enlightened mind. And so having beautified our mind, made offerings, and expressed our respect, the next stage, the third stage in the puja, is to express the fact that we want to emulate our modern guests, our honoured guests. We want to emulate them. We want to align ourselves with them. We want to be more like them. And this takes the form of what's called going for refuge. So going for refuge, if you haven't come across it, it's Buddhist code for committing ourselves to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, committing ourselves to the spiritual life. So we commit ourselves. We say, look, I want to become like you, basically. I want to open myself up. I want to be more like an enlightened being. And that takes a very concrete form. After that, we chant what's called the refuges and precepts in an ancient language called Pali. So we're chanting the refuges. We're saying, I commit myself to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, but we're also taking on the Buddhist precepts, the Buddhist 5 precepts, which of course is the most concrete way of saying, I'm going to live more like I'm an enlightened being. I'm going to align myself with the enlightened mind. But having done that, well, if that's going to have any effect, we need to acknowledge where we're not already doing it. So we need to acknowledge those areas of our life that are not aligned with the enlightened mind, that are not going to lead us towards enlightenment, where we don't act like an enlightened being. And this stage, the fourth stage, is called the confession of faults. Now that might sound a bit grim and Christian, but it's acknowledging where we're not currently doing it, acknowledging where we need to change. It's not about a guilt trip, it's about an acknowledgement trip. And if we don't do that, how are we going to change? If we just think, well, I'm already perfect, fine. What's the point? So we're acknowledging where our life is not aligned with the enlightened mind. where we're nothing like our honoured guest. And we're undertaking, at least to try to move towards that. Such acts in the future. Yeah, I make this aspiration, such acts in the future I will not do. So it's an aspiration to move in that direction. And of course, this acknowledgement could leave us feeling a bit flat. Well, great, I want to open up to the enlightened mind, I want to be like that. But my word, I'm nothing like it at the moment. That could be the feeling. I've got a lot to do. So it could leave us a bit flat. So the counter that, the next stage in the practice is rejoicing in merit. Rejoicing in merit. We rejoice in all expressions of the bodhicitta, right from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, right down to the good done by all beings. Every little skillful positive act is seen as, in a way, an expression of the bodhicitta at some sort of level. And we're rejoicing in all of that. We're rejoicing in all of that. And I think we could use an analogy of this, which is very topical, which is if we support a football team, we rejoice. If we play in a football team, for example, we rejoice if anyone scores the goal, not just if we do. If we support a football team, we rejoice every time they win. And so we're sort of saying, well, I want to be on your team. I want to be on your team. It's not just about me and my spiritual successes. It's about us and our spiritual successes. All of us, all of us. I rejoice in all of that. We're joining the bodhicitta's team, rejoicing in all its successes. So the next stage after that is called entreaty and supplication. And it's basically an expression of receptivity, an expression of willingness to be taught. So, okay, I've got to this point, but I need some help. I need some help. I'm willing to be taught. Please tell me what to do if you like. And having done that, having expressed this willingness to be taught, we hear a teaching. We hear a traditional canonical teaching. Normally one is read out. And following that, we chant the Heart Sutra. And I'm not going to say anything about that, but it is a very traditional canonical teaching, which in a way puts whatever comes before it in a certain sort of context, a sort of wisdom context. And that brings us then to the final stage of the sevenfold puja, where we act out, giving ourselves to the bodhicitta. It's as though we've invited an honoured guest into our living accommodation. We've made them comfortable. We've expressed a desire to be more like them, etc., and expressed our receptivity to them. And now we're going to say, well, okay, I want to work for you. I'm giving myself to you. Almost I'm surrendering myself to you. It's called transference of merit and self-surrender. So it's like surrendering the small self to something much bigger. And again, loads of perhaps resistance to that idea. But in a way, there's a song by Bob Dylan, you've got to serve somebody. I don't know if any Bob Dylan fans here. You've got to serve somebody. You've got to serve something. We're always serving something. It might be our petty wants and fears, or it might be something bigger. And this is saying, I'd rather serve something bigger. And so we say some words in that section, which we probably can't fully mean, actually. We're not ready for this. We're not ready for this. I'm not ready for this. You're probably not ready for it, or maybe you are. But so what we're doing is it's a sort of rehearsal. It's a sort of, we're acting out something, which makes it more likely to happen in the future. The way when kids play, they're sort of pretending to be something that helps them to become that thing. And we're doing that. We're sort of playing at being a bodhisattva. And that makes it easier to become a bodhisattva. So yeah, it's a sort of rehearsal. And it's not done in a spirit of martyrdom. It's not done like, oh, well, I'm a worm and I give myself to the bodhicitta. And it's not like that at all. And that's really brought out by the fact that there's a sort of metaphor of giving a feast. I invite the world to be my guest at a great feast of delight. So giving a party, giving a feast is a joyful act of generosity. And this is meant to be a joyful act of generosity. It's going to make us happy. It's going to make the world happy. It's a joyful act of generosity to the world. I invite the world to be my guest at a great feast, at a big party. Right? I'm throwing a big party. So that's a sort of culmination. We give ourselves to the bodhicitta. And that's followed by, we chant some mantras at that point. We chant some mantras, which can put us in touch, I think, at an archetypal level with some actual expressions of the bodhicitta, some archetypal figures who express the bodhicitta on a sort of archetypal level. Now, I have to say a few things about this. This is an advanced practice. I think at some point Sangha actually said it's probably a mistake to have introduced this into our practice level that we do. It's an advanced practice, opening up to the bodhicitta. It's like, ooh, that's a bit of a step forward from practicing the precepts and doing the mindfulness and breathing. But it's a rehearsal. We're rehearsing letting go of small mind and opening up to big mind. But if it was just about that, maybe it wouldn't have such an important role in our practice as it does, because it's not just that, it's also a powerful way of expressing and strengthening our sense of community. There was a psychologist, I think, called Eric Fromm, who talked about rational ritual. And I can't remember the exact quote, but it runs something like, rational ritual is shared action, expressive of common strivings, rooted in a shared vision. And that's what we're doing in the Sevenfold Puja, shared action, rooted in common strivings, expressing a shared vision. And it can be really powerful, a really powerful sense of shared community. When we come to make an offering to the shrine, very often what people do is completely match their movements with somebody else. And that can give a really strong sense of rapport, stronger than we can get with language. Where two of us, we're expressing something together. We're expressing something, our commitment to something higher, our commitment to this community. So it's a powerful way of strengthening, expressing this sense of community. And, well, frankly, a lot of us have done the Sevenfold Puja lots of times, but if you've never done it before, it might seem a bit odd. Give it a go. Give it a go. Try not to let the rational mind say, oh, don't do ritual. We all do ritual. It's a ritual partly about expressing common community. And if you think we don't do that, watch a football match. Football is a clear ritual about creating a completely phony sense of community between people who've got very little in common, actually. But we so hunger for that we'll do it. So just try to sort of let go of any prejudices about it and just see how it goes. Join in as much as you like if you want to, and treat it as theatre. Theatre, I think we often use this analogy, but you don't need to believe that Fred Jones from down the road is really a Prince of Denmark when he's on the stage in order to be engaged in the play and have your emotions transformed by it. So you don't even have to believe it, you just try it out. So that's a bit about the Sevenfold Puja, and I hope you get a chance to sort of experience it, hopefully all together, because that's the way it really works. Relatively soon. Unfortunately, we could have done it a bit earlier, but we have to wait. Thank you.